Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Nadine Mentor Williams. I am a partner and senior managing director at MiDA Advisors, and I'd like to welcome you to the first of the Investing in Africa, The Time is Now 2024 webinar series presented by MiDA Advisors and Standard Bank. Today is Wednesday, March 6th, and we're excited to kick off our first session with an amazing panel of women leaders in Africa. March is also Women's History Month. It's International Women's Day on March 8th, this Friday. And we want to spotlight not only the African investment opportunities, but also the impact of women in Africa's economic growth. So thank you for sharing your time with us for the next hour to learn more and to understand the current African investment landscape and to learn more about the impact of women in Africa's economic growth. We honor your time, we thank you for your time, and we thank you for being here to learn more about Africa, to learn more about the investment opportunities, and to learn more about how you can be involved, how you can participate, and how you can bring this information back to your respective organizations. Today, we are joined from people all over the world, from asset allocators in the US, in Africa, in Europe, to fund managers who are in Africa, throughout Africa, and consultants who are joining us globally. We are also joined by our partner organizations at Standard Bank Group. We're also joined by NGOs, the United Nations, the World Bank, and we're also joined by different organizations that have been part of MiDA's delegation trips, as well as the United States government, Prosper Africa, and the U.S. International Development Corporation, the DFC. So again, we thank you, and we're excited to be here today to learn more about investing in Africa. The objective of this first webinar is to bring together asset allocators and consultants from the continent who are actively investing in various sectors in Africa. This webinar will also highlight the importance of diversity within an investment portfolio as a winning strategy for investors looking to unlock the full investment opportunities available in African markets and to generate the best return. And so for this first webinar, we have women leaders representing different organizations that are investing in Africa. For our next webinar, we'll be focused on some of the fund managers, the women fund managers who are investing and who are mobilizing capital internationally, as well as generating positive returns while having a major impact on the African economy. And later this year, we'll also be looking at what can asset allocators globally do to move the needle forward with regards to generating positive returns in their respective portfolios and bringing together the best in class of fund managers that are investing in Africa. So again, I want to thank you for your time. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelist speakers. First, we have Ms. Mantuka Maisela. She is the chairperson for the Motor Industry Retirement Fund. Ms. Mantuka is well known globally as an advocate for women, fund managers, as an advocate for Africa. She has traveled extensively through her different organizations within the pension plan community in South Africa, as well as globally connecting with the National Association of Securities Professionals. And she has attended many of the African and Emerging Markets Summit through NAST, and she has been a champion for the U.S. government's Prosper Africa inaugural Women and Economic Mentoring and Incubation Program, WeMe, in South Africa, as well as for the African Women Impact Fund, that is a Pan-African fund that is supported by the UNECA, United Nations. Ms. Maisela has been a champion in the HR global industry, but also a champion for women. So thank you for joining us. Our next panelist we have is Ms. Sonia Essobmadje. She's the Chief in Innovation Finance and Capital Markets Section for the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. She has been a champion and proponent of development in Africa, not only with UNECA, but with several different organizations globally, focused on educating and providing positive impact for not only women, for all people on the African continent. She's a well-known speaker who was sought after and most recently presented at a major pension conference in Mauritius. She has over 17 years of combined experience in financial markets, sustainable finance business, support advisory, and structured finance. In her current role, she supports the deepening of the financing architecture and the development of capital markets to increase savings and investments pool and mobilize more capital. Her key work programs include risk mitigation, which is so important for asset allocators and consultants, alternative investments, and sustainable development of capital markets. Prior to her position, she was an investment banker for nearly 15 years. So her experience and her expertise are well sought and appreciated and valued as part of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. So welcome. Thank you for being with us. And finally, we have Ms. Joyce Mutungi, who is the chairperson for the Kenya Pipeline Company Retirement Benefits Scheme. She's a trustee of this organization of the defined benefits since 2021. She retired for the Kenyan Pipeline Company Limited in 2019, where she held various positions in the finance, revenue accounting, and internal audit departments over a period of over 30 years. Alongside formal employment, she served as a board member and later chairperson of the Ken Pipe Sanco between 2006 and 2017. She is also a member of KEPFIG, which is a consortium of Kenyan pension plans that have come together to invest at scale in infrastructure and development in Kenya, and who has invested alongside U.S. asset allocators, capital coming in from the U.S. to mobilize capital in Kenya. And I should also note that each of our speakers have been very passionate leaders and advocates for collaboration. And that's one of the reasons why they are each our panelists today, the importance of collaboration and working together. Ms. Mantuka with the Assets Owners Forum in South Africa, Ms. Sonia with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and Ms. Joyce with the KEPFIG, the Kenya Pension Plans Consortium in Kenya. So without further ado, I'd like to kick off my first question to our esteemed panelists. And the first question is really, tell us a little bit more about your organization and specifically what your organization is investing in Africa and why. So I'd like to start off with Ms. Mantuka. Would you kick us off, please? You're on mute. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Sorry, I wasn't aware that I muted. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. I'm very much excited about this initiative, especially that focuses on investing in Africa. The time is now. And I think as African women who are in this panel, we'd like you to join us and come home with us. I am Mantuka Maisela. They call me Mantuka because of my age and having been in the pension fund industry for many, many years. I am a human resource practitioner by training. However, due to my human resource profession, I managed to be involved in pension funds, which talk to employee benefits in organizations. I've worked in various organizations in the oil and gas industry, in the construction industry, in the mining industry in South Africa. And I've also chaired a number of boards of companies in our country. In the pension fund space, I chaired the Eskom Pension Fund, which is the second biggest pension fund in Africa. I serve as an independent advisor on the Government Employee Pension Fund, which is the largest in Africa, and I think the seventh largest in the world. And at the moment, I'm chairing the Motor Industry Pension Fund, which is amongst the top 100 pension funds in our country. Our pension fund, the Motor Industry, and then I also mentioned that Nadine did indicate that I'm a member of the Asset Owners Forum, which is a forum that was put together. We saw the need to collaborate as pension funds to contribute towards impact-related investments and also support emerging asset managers as well as female asset managers. I'm also in the independent commission of the remuneration of public office bearers, which is responsible for determining remuneration of all public office bearers, including the president and his cabinet. Now, coming back to the motor industry, the question was, where are we investing in, and what is the motor industry retirement fund? The motor industry retirement fund, as I indicated, it's funds of 5 pension funds in the motor industry, anything in the motor industry from petrol to panel beaters to motor manufacturers and all sorts of things. We also have another fund that looks at retired pensioners in the industry. We cater for 300,000 members, and we are in US term about 200 billion rand assets under management. Our focus area, our country has got a stipulated regulations around asset allocations, and in our country we stick very closely to that. However, this regulation over the past year has allowed us to invest 45% of our assets outside South Africa, which then opened a door for us to invest largely in Africa, even though in the private equity space, we do invest in other countries to yield pound, rand, and dollar revenue. Now, why Africa? Africa is a growing market. It's growing leaps and bounds. The youth development is very, very high. We invest in capital in secular growth drivers where demographics, urbanization, and technology adoption meet. There are sectors that include non-discretionary consumers, that is education, health, technology-enabled business services, digital infrastructure, energy transition, water sanitation, and anything that brings a large impact in societies. I was looking at a billboard the other day, and it said, raise funds or raise communities. And then they said, why not both? The assets that we're investing in, whilst we would like to gain revenue, but we would like to be able to create job opportunities and raise communities and ensure that the quality of lives of Africans throughout the whole continent are improved, and the services and infrastructure in Africa is well looked after. That's us in short. I've mentioned the region, I've mentioned the asset classes, mostly private equity and venture capital.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thankful for your advocacy, thankful for your leadership and the opportunity to really focus on mobilizing, especially infrastructure investments. So thank you so much, Mama Mantuka. I appreciate it. Sonia, will you share a little bit about UNECA and your role there?
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, and I'm very honored to be with you. Nadid, you did a great job because you introduced me very well, so I will just add to what has been said. So as you mentioned, I'm Chief of the Innovative Finance and Capital Market at ECA, and ECA is the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. So in short, we say ECA. It's one of the 5 regional commissions of the United Nations. It was established in 1958 to promote the economic and social development of its 54 member states. And when we say member states, we refer to the 54 countries that are member of the UN. Our goal is also to foster intra-regional integration and promote international cooperation for Africa's development. We have three main functions. The first one is think tank. We conduct multi-sectoral research and analysis to support the integration of the three pillars of sustainable development and foster peer learning and policy advocacy. Our second function or mandate is convening. So we provide regional, intergovernmental, and multi-stakeholder platforms to agree on development policy frameworks, standards, and action plans. And finally, our last function is operational. We do provide technical support to our member states. So to your question, where do we invest? We are not investors in the traditional sense of the word, but we aim to facilitate public and private partnerships, and also, of course, in the area of investment, area that is critical to support the economic and social development of the continent. We focus on the continent, so we do not. Our mandate is basically continental. And in terms of asset class, if I can put it that way, our main, asset class is grant in the form of technical assistance that we do provide to member states, and also to, and I would say the idea basically is really to have that, to act as a facilitator. So we want to bridge the gap between the public sector and the private sector. Our work mainly consists of supporting the dynamics of our financial ecosystems through capacity building, creating an enabling environment, notably through the review of regulatory frameworks and make sure that they comply with international standards and also research. We cover all the relevant sectors that contribute to Africa's sustainable development. I just want to add one more last thing. When we talk about investment, we see our role at ECA really as, connecting the dots, if I may say so. So we know the importance of having, of mobilizing resources for our own development. And the recent crisis, also demonstrated that we cannot solely rely on external financial flows to develop our economies, to build the infrastructures that we need. So I'm still very excited to be with you, and the work we are doing in supporting building capacity of our institutional investors so that they can invest in alternative asset classes is very important and very critical for the development of the continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that is, I agree with you 100%, the critical aspect of the technical capacity building for institutional investors to help them become more educated, more informed, and more comfortable with investing in alternative classes. We know that in some areas that is not as common on the continent as in other areas. So what you're doing is very tremendous. We co-hosted with you a technical capacity building in West Africa last November, really trying to educate the West African institutional investors about the opportunities for collaboration and consortium building, similar to what we hosted with the South Africa Assets Owners Forum, as well as with KEPFIG in Kenya. So speaking of Kenya, I'm excited to introduce and welcome Joyce. Ms. Joyce, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you so much for your leadership and being a chairperson. And I just like to recognize that we have two chair people that are on. And so it's not just being a trustee, but the leadership within your respective organizations. Ms. Joyce, if you'd like to share a little bit more about your organization, what do you invest in and what are you looking at?
Thank you. As you've heard, my name is Joyce, and I am a trustee in a pension scheme that is sponsored by the Kenya Pipeline Company, a company in the oil transport sector. The company has got two pension schemes, a defined contribution scheme and a defined benefit scheme. I am a trustee in the closed defined benefit scheme, although we do work quite closely with the other scheme. let me start by saying that the pension sector in Kenya has been quite, in a sense, stringently regulated. And we therefore invest within the regulatory guidelines. For my pension scheme, as at 30th June 2023, we had an asset base of 7.3 billion Kenyan shillings, which is about 49.7 million US dollars. The pension fund has about 1,600 members, and half of the members are in retirement for the closed scheme. For the open scheme, the DC scheme, we have a membership of about 1,400 and an asset value of about 8 billion, which brings our total assets to about 110 million. Our assets are mainly invested in government bonds. The regulator allows us to invest up to 90% of our investments in government bonds. And the other significant area of investment has been in the securities exchange, the Nairobi Securities Exchange. And then we also have had, in recent years, the alternative investment class has been added. And so we are now starting to venture out into some of the areas that Mantuka has mentioned in South Africa. So like I said, about 50% in treasury bonds, 15% in the securities exchange. And the other big area of investment for a lot of pension funds in Kenya is in real estate. Usually it starts off as either vacant land that you develop or directly into, let's say, an office building, like in our case. We also have the alternative investments limit is at, I think, 15% now. And so we are sort of just making baby steps into alternative investments. We are also investing offshore in US dollars mostly. Yes, so in terms of alternative investments, some of the things that have now come up are real estate investment trusts, so that we are not holding so much to brick and mortar as to a sort of a tangible, but not all ours. We are not holding the entire risk associated with having, brick and mortar. We are also, yes, so you find that, for instance, our scheme is now trying to divest from the real estate that we are holding, specifically the vacant plots, which other than a capital appreciation are not really generating an income. Let me stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think you all highlighted some of the sectors that you're looking at, your focus areas. And I just want to say for the participants who are on, we will dedicate the last about 15 minutes for Q&A. There's a Q&A icon on the lower part of your screen. So if you have any questions, please do type it in the chat. We want this to be interactive. We want this to be an opportunity that you can ask questions of the asset allocators, of UNECA, private partnerships. Many on this call, and I'm seeing some of the participants, have received funding from African asset allocators. Some are still trying to receive funding, and some have received support from UNECA as well as from the US government. And so really that, when we talk about the capacity building, when we talk about mobilizing capital, when we talk about the opportunities to connect resources, that is so pivotal to really looking at some of the success stories. And so I'm going to ask all of our panelists to share one success story in terms of what your particular organization has done to help the African investment landscape. But before I do that, I just want to highlight what's the opportunity here. And so we talk about the investing in Africa and the time is now. Why is the time now? The time is now because 1.1 billion people occupy the workforce of Africa by 2040. So by 2040, the African workforce will be 1.1 billion people, the largest in the world. In 2011, only 19 million people in Africa had smartphones. In 2011, by 2028, that number is projected to increase to 689 million people with smartphones. Africa will have 15 megacities by 2040. 15 megacities. That means megacities are populations of 10 million or greater. So 15 megacities, one of the largest again in the world. 345 companies will have revenues over $1 billion in Africa by the end of this year. By 2050, 29 trillion, it will be a $29 trillion economy. And by 2030, 1 out of every 4 people in the world will be African. And so the time is now. The time was actually yesterday, but the time is now, and it's urgent. You do not want to be left out of this opportunity set. You want to be a part of the solution. And really for our asset allocators and our consultants to really educate yourself, your board, your trustees, your consultants, your investment staff, to get them comfortable with Africa and make them understand that Africa should be a part of every portfolio, because Africa is part of our global society that cannot be ignored. And so working with UNECA, working with the Assets Owners Forum, working with KEPFIG, working with the US government, working with Standard Bank, working with our partners globally, NASP, working with the African Institutional Investment Advisory Council, that is part of MiDA and NASP, working with asset allocators who have already invested in Africa from the US. The time is now and the opportunity set is now. And so I think it's really important to highlight success stories, because sometimes when you read about news headlines or you're watching certain news clips, some things are very dire when they are showing things about Africa. But there's a lot of positive news coming out of Africa. There's a lot of positive news coming out of the entrepreneur set. There's a lot of positive news coming from women-owned businesses, women-led asset management firms that we need to capture, we need to educate, and we need to be a part of the solution. So I'll ask Sonia if you want to share a success story that you've had with UNECA working and focused on investing in Africa.
So I think, so I will choose maybe one, or let's say 2. So the first one is that initiative that we are developing also with MiDA advisors, and basically is the objective is to design a consortium for West African pension funds. And why did we first choose West Africa, and what is our interest in working with institutional investors in that specific sub-region? So I would say, 1, because this is a very dynamic sub-region, and I think there is a strong potential, to push to push institutional investors to, allocate part of the asset under management to infrastructure project. And we know that there are still significant financing needs in the fields of renewable energies, water, health, telecommunications, transports, housing. So we see, and for all the reasons that you have mentioned, right? This is the continent where the population is expected to grow, to double by 2050. And clearly, it's also a market for not just our African pension funds, but also for international investors. I strongly believe that if we really want to, if we want to have a financial sector that is dynamic and that is fully involved in, in supporting the development of our economies, one thing that is key is really to make sure that they have the tools. First of all, they have the skills and the expertise, and also that they have the tools to make such decision, to monitor the investments. And of course, when we look at the continent, all the countries do not have the same level of development, whether in terms of, expertise, track record, or in terms of, conducive rules and regulations. So this is also where we see we can, bring significant added value, and this is what we want to do in West Africa. So this is one initiative that we have started, and I see this as, opening also several doors for, more collaboration. At ECA, we also foster peer learning. So what, for instance, South Africa has, successfully been, has successfully done when it comes to alternative investment. This is something that can be easily also replicated in other environment. So we also want to foster that, opportunity for them to learn from one another. ECA is also supporting, the agenda to have one common market. And I think if we want to have one common market, we need to be able then, to invest, across the continent, right? Investors in South Africa need to know that they can invest in West Africa. And one way to do that is to build local partnerships. People who know best the context and the dynamic of West Africa are our institutional investor base there, right? So if we want to foster that partnership, we need to make sure that they are well trained, they can screen and they can screen the project, they can invest, and they can co-invest with others. So this is one initiative I believe that is really critical, and we are still working on it. The other one that I would like to mention is, of course, you also mentioned it at the beginning, the African Women in Pakistan. ECA is very proud to, of all the progress that we have done so far when it comes to that initiatives. And I need to make justice to all the partners and stakeholders involved, including MiDA advisors, Standard Bank, Wiskura, and others, UN Women, the African Union. So I think this is another example where I see strong collaboration, because we have the same end goal here. We want to see our women in Africa empowered. And we know that if we give them that potential, if we provide them with the tool and the support, they can bring significant contribution to the GDP of the continent. So this is another initiative that we are very proud of. And I'm pretty sure that for most of the participants here and people who will follow, who are following online, they will stay tuned, because there are, significant developments, and we very much look forward to see that initiative, grow even further and develop even further. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And that is really important, the relationship building. When we talk about how do we close the investment gap, how do we close the, how do we address the needs? We focus on education, we focus on relationship building, and we focus on mobilizing capital into the continent. And so you really highlighted all three of them right now, Sonia. So that's really important. Thank you so much. Ms. Joyce, would you like to highlight a success story or something that perhaps with KEPFIG or perhaps with your pension plan in terms of investing on the continent?
Yes, I think one of the things that has really been impactful is the going into investing in infrastructure. And KEPFIG has been particularly helpful because, as you know, the cost of due diligence can be quite prohibitive. And in terms of just doing, at the minimum, a high-level due diligence of the possibilities that are available for investment, KEPFIG has been very, very helpful. We did have one project on road systems, some roads in Kenya. It's not quite come through, but KEPFIG did a good job of really making it, presenting it to a lot of pension schemes through their different forums. The other area that I would say is a success story is the introduction of real estate investment trusts. Like we have one in Kenya that is doing student accommodation, and it has been really successful. Most of it is in Nairobi as of now, but at least near most private and public universities, you find they have very decent student accommodation that is affordable. They give, options of one that is not too costly and another one that is quite high end. And these have really picked. And of course, in relation to that, we've also seen other funds that have gone into REITs. Like we have the CPF that has converted a lot of its property portfolio into a REIT. And, it's in a sense trailblazing for other pension schemes that are heavy on real estate to see that you don't have to hold on to it by yourself. You can divest without necessarily literally selling. Yes, so I would highlight those two for now. Yeah. But on the other hand, I like the stats that you have given about Africa, the growing population, the growing opportunities in infrastructure, in health, in water, sanitation, and hygiene. With the county governments that we now have, there are lots of opportunities to put in place, waste disposal systems, to have running water in a lot of urban areas, to provide housing. I mean, there's so much that needs to be done that if we're looking to the government alone for it, it would take a really long time. But with opportunities for public-private partnerships, I can see us moving faster than we would if we sit back and wait for the government.
That's very important. Thank you so much, Ms. Joyce. And you highlighted KEPFIG and some of the work that KEPFIG has been doing. And KEPFIG was able to co-invest with U.S. asset allocators, including the city of Philadelphia, including the city of Hartford, $90 million into opportunities, including investing in women, small and medium-sized enterprises. ESCOM was able to invest as well with Chicago Teachers Pension Fund. And so the opportunity to co-invest is real, and we continue to work with our South African asset allocators, our Kenyan South African allocators, and our allocators globally, including in Europe, in the UK, including in the US. Many of you know, and some of you may not know, but we work at MiDA Advisors. We work with the US government to help facilitate the education, the relationship building, and the mobilization of capital. As an advisory firm, we have worked with the African Women Impact Fund, with UNECA, as well as with the AOFSA, as well as with KEPFIG. And to date, MiDA's efforts, we've been able to facilitate over $1.8 billion into the continent, including from San Francisco, Employees Retirement System, over $100 million, including Teachers Retirement System of Texas, over $50 million, as well as Casey Family Foundation, over $100 million. And so what Ms. Joyce was saying with regards to Africa and the opportunities, Africa is home to the world's youngest and fastest growing population. The median age on the continent is only 19 years old. And Africa is the most rapidly urbanizing continent on the planet. And I just want to make sure I made this clear. 1 in 4 people in the world will be African by 2050, by 2050. And so that's really important as I turn over to Mama Mantuka to share a little bit about the success stories and, the importance of women as part of the success story in Africa. Mama Mantuka? Mute.
Thanks, Nadine, and thanks to the panelists. I think the collaboration on its own is a success story. In the past, people used to work in silos. We never knew what was happening in other parts of Africa because of the misconception and the doubts that people had about the African continent. Now, the fact that we all came to the table and put our minds together to collaborate and grow the African continent. That on its own, to me, is a success story. Especially collaborating only amongst ourselves and also bringing in US companies to invest in Africa. It's a success story. The second thing is that we are seeing greater capital being channeled into climate resilient themed funds across the capital market spectrum, be it VC, be it private equity, be it infrastructure that Joyce was talking about highly tropical to Africa. It's highly tropical to Africa, and we are all experiencing the challenges of El Niños, which are impacting on our environment. The success stories about women. I'm gonna say a lot about women because indeed it's a big advantage. As you all know that 46% of women are employed within the sector, but only 15% are in executive positions. And then the asset management space, the number is lower. 4.9 of partners in the venture capital are women in senior positions, and in private equity, it's only 10% of it. So there's a lot of underrepresentation in the sector. So by growing female asset managers, we are addressing a bigger issue here. We're not just trying to moan about ourselves. We are trying to bring in PE and venture capital that is increasingly important role in the economic development of the emerging market. And it's also providing alternative funding opportunities for entrepreneurs, development, and growth. Only 12% of decision makers are women, global, representing 1 in 8. Now, looking at that background, you can already see that there is a need to develop women. In South Africa, the Asset Owners Forum have come together to ensure that they share or they co-invest in female asset managers. Success stories, for instance, and most of these women only started their funds 5 years ago. Some of them are already sitting at $2 billion, 2 billion rands. And Matlaku Investment, for instance, Nadine was partnering with us in mentoring and coaching asset managers who are female, because they're experiencing a lot of challenges in industry of being undermined, and some of the challenges are caused, it lies in the attitude, the cultures, the norms, and the policies towards women. One of the key things that we were successful in doing was to get these women on board. And what these women have done is phenomenal. Matlaku backed and spearheaded the first solar PV wheelie project, transferring electricity from its generated sources through the power networks and supplying a lot of consumers in the South African market. You are aware that we do have problems at the moment with electricity, and to see a women-led company spearheading. That's why I said earlier on, you know, when you empower a woman, you empower the nation, because they tend to look at projects that will help society. The other one was Old Free Capital. I would like to believe that all of you know about Old Free Investments. They announced their third investment in West Africa, e-mobility company, Wahoo, that design, manufactures, and sells electric vehicles and provides a comprehensive fleet management solution to the problem. A woman-led business, young and new and emerging. The third one is Sanara. Sanara Capital has been in existence for about 10 years. Again, a woman-led business. It has invested into leading leader technology company in South Africa. The business has seen extensive growth and expanded their operations globally. They're not only a local company, but they expanded globally in other parts of Africa, as well as other global players. The production of the LEADER products allow devices to determine the distance between a target and object, the application of which can be used extensive in the fourth industrial revolution. Those are the success stories. I can mention a lot because in our mandates, we have helped to build a diversified portfolio in around 100 of the best privately led companies. And we have managed to empower asset managers who were previously disadvantaged. So those are the success stories that I can share. Well, the other ones that Joyce has mentioned, student accommodation as well. We have been very good in that, and affordable housing, and also put those panels, solar panels on top of the affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mama Mantuka. Very important to highlight the success stories in women and in collaboration and impact. Some of those on the line were part of the first inaugural transaction that invested $276 million into West African housing, affordable housing, to lower the rate of interest for potential homeowners, for 6,000 homeowners in West Africa in the Wamu region. MiDA Advisors worked with the US government, with Prosper Africa, with the USDFC, as well as with Bank of America and Brain Capital to bring $276 million of international investors into that region for the first time in longer dated investments. And so bringing those affordable housing innovation to other areas, providing, and like Sonia said before, the risk mitigants so that US asset allocators, US investors are more comfortable coming into Africa and understanding that there's value and there's return in the African investment economy. So thank you. We do have a few questions and I want to get to those questions. I do have a couple more questions. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to type it in the chat. Joyce, I think both of these questions are directed to you. So Terrell Gamble, who is an asset allocator from Alameda County, who has been on several of the delegation trips, who's well informed about Africa and who has invested in Africa. So he asked, does Kenya not, so Kenya does not invest in active managers in VC or PE. So I will rephrase that. Does Kenya invest in active managers in VC or PE?
There are definitely investments in through PE or, venture capital kind of initiatives. In fact, our own scheme already is invested in one called Adenia, and there are many others in Kenya. I think a lot of the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises in this country have really been propelled by, PE and VE, venture capital initiatives. It's not, that's for sure. And over and above that, definitely the government has done a lot to support young people who are really the majority of players, young people and women who are the majority of players in the, small business space. And that is definitely a big part of the government agenda, because otherwise unemployment would be really high, and that definitely doesn't augur well for any government. So in short, I'm saying yes, there are PE and venture capital involvements in both, especially in entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you, Joyce. And there's a related question. The next question is a related question. It says, thank you for hosting this educational and insightful webinar from Safu Ngonga. In regard to the Kenyan pension scheme investments, are there any prospects to shift more capital in growth, later stage private investments outside of the real estate sector? If not, why? But if yes, expand.
Help me to get the question correct. Are there more opportunities to...
Are there any prospects to shift more capital in growth, later stage private investments outside of the real estate sector?
Definitely, there are prospects and opportunities. Like I said, a lot of pension funds, for example, would want to be more active in the infrastructure space, whether you're talking about roads, transport, energy. Those opportunities are definitely there in plenty. And with regard to the property bits, I mean, right now, one of the 4 government agendas for Kenya, one of them is housing. So really, in the fullness of time, one cannot go wrong about holding land or property that, can be converted into housing. I think you probably heard stories about a housing levy that had been introduced in Kenya. Really, the leadership of the country is really keen to provide decent housing for more people. So there are lots of opportunities in that regard, not just in the capital city, but even in the upcoming county headquarters. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joyce. We appreciate your response and your advocacy to diversify and expanding the investment opportunities into more PE and VC. So thank you. We have a question from Ms. Geraldine. What are the investors on the panel doing to impact the entire African continent? Seeing it is a continent of 54 countries, there has been an ongoing problem of the majority of VC and PE investments going into the big 4 countries. So I'm not sure if anyone in particular would like to answer this question. But Mantuka, I know that the Assets Owners Forum is looking at expanding to Southern Africa and not just South Africa. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit in that regards as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure which 4 countries is the question targeting. However, asset allocators have been very, very cautious in allocating assets to various countries to try and avoid risks of focusing on a few. Egypt, for instance, there's been a roaring success of investments by asset managers. Ghana, funny enough, even Jordan, I know of a lot of asset managers who have invested in Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, Angola, quite a number, and Botswana as well, and Lesotho in the agri space. So we are not only focusing on a few companies, we are focusing on larger communities because we would like to make an impact in Africa and we would like to grow the African continent. One might think, because they don't know where we are investing, they might think we are selective in terms of investing. But our mission, all of us in this webinar or in this panel, are all looking towards growing the continent as a whole, not focusing on, because it will be myopic to focus on only four countries and not look at the others, because then the risk is high. If the investments are not yielding results, then the whole industry might collapse. Thanks.
That's really important. Thank you so much, Mantuka. And that's a great question. We know that through MiDA Advisors with the US government, we have also led delegation trips to Senegal, to Egypt, to South Africa. We've gone to Botswana, Morocco, Namibia on really research gathering trips. We have, through the African Women Impact Fund, we have women that are from countries throughout the continent, not just in 4 countries, as well as through the WeMeet program, we've had women through South Africa, Botswana, as well as Namibia. And so we are very proactive about outreach, education, and tapping into and learning about the investment opportunities in different countries and not just in the top 4. But thank you so much for that question. We have time for maybe 1 or 2. We're going to try to get to your question, Yedidia. But we have too few women in the general investment space to be able to increase female fund managers at the required pace. What can be done to increase that foundational female investment talent pool? So this is more about the female investment talent pool. I know that Sonia is working on some of that with the technical assistance. Again, we have too few women in the general investment space to be able to increase female fund managers at the required pace. What can be done to increase that foundational female investment talent pool? I think working with the African Women Impact Fund is huge because it's not only educating the owners, but also those that are part of the team, and hopefully attracting new people into the investment space. The same with WeMe, that has been really pivotal in terms of attracting new people into the investment space, and not just going after those who are already in the investment space, but going after those who are in accounting, who are in finance, going after those who are in school to educate and give them exposure to this field before they start working. So the education starts really in high school and college, and as young employees to get them exposure to this. So this type of webinar, for example, is open to everyone. We marketed this widely, so they're more than welcome to learn more and to tap into Standard Bank with AWIF, or to MiDA with WeMe, or to UNECA with some of the activities that they're doing to bring women into this space. So I think that is really important. I'm actually going to also turn the next question a little bit to Sonia. Thank you so much for your thoughts and for motivating experiences. A wonderful panel of distinguished women. In your experience, what is the best method to approach risk mitigation? I know that's some of your background.
So I think this is a very interesting question, but I will assume that it does not apply just to women-led fund managers, right? So generally speaking, I think when we talk about risk, there is something that we need to be aware of. Africa is 54 countries, but to be honest, there is not a difference between a fund manager sitting in South Africa willing to invest in West Africa and a fund manager sitting in the US willing to invest in West Africa. They need to understand the dynamic. They need to understand the risk. They need to be able to understand exactly the type of project. They need to conduct that due diligence. And this is where, as mentioned by the other panelists, collaboration, partnership is really important. I'm always joking and asking people, if your sister come to you and say, can you lend me 100 USD? You say no, but I will introduce you to one of my friends to lend you 100 USD. You, as the friend, how are you going to feel? Like, if your own brother cannot hand you, cannot lend you 100 USD, how a completely stranger can do that? And this is basically what is happening when we talk about investment in Africa. Like, we don't know ourselves, we are not creating enough, opportunities within the country before inviting others. So I think we need to work more on collaboration, but that collaboration starts with us being able to, identify real pipeline of project, have the right tools to do the due diligence, monitor our investment, and then invite others to collaborate, to co-invest with us so that they can learn with us. We have some skin in the game. We are not asking others to take investment or risk that we are not willing ourselves to take. So I think that aspect is very important. And there is, generally that perception of risk when we talk about the continent. And I think another way to also address that is through proper communication. we need to have the data. We need to be able to communicate in full transparency in terms of what are the challenges, where do we see opportunities. And sometimes I feel like this is also an area that we neglect. We tend to react instead of, reaching out to investors. We can have shadow roadshow. We reach out to them. Where is your interest? And we know that, and most of our, partners know that there is a strong potential in Africa. I think our mission now is to turn that potential into concrete, into a concrete pipeline of projects. And this is basically where working all together is critical. Where there is a lack of capacity, ECA will be happy to support. Where there is opportunities for co-investment, we do have here, Mantuka, Joyce, they are happy to consider. And then it's easier to invite international investors to join us to co-invest in one transaction because they are not left alone to do the due diligence. They will find expertise within the continent, and they will find that we have the right tool and we can co-invest with them instead of inviting them to invest. Because I strongly believe that the future of this continent is in our hands. So we need to really, we need to stand up and take that first move. Thank you.
And that's why we have Sonia on the panel with Joyce, with Mama Mantuka, because they are passionate leaders and advocates about why it's important to invest in Africa and working alongside each other so that we can move forward faster, and more impactful to make a greater impact in Africa. And so just on the risk mitigation, there are tools, there are resources available. Education is really pivotal. Understanding what are those resources and tools, and we have information that we can provide to asset allocators, to fund managers, to consultants who would like to learn more about it. Please don't hesitate to reach out. We will be sending a recording of this to everyone that registered, as well as the contact information, so that if you have questions, we can definitely connect and make sure that it's not just staying in this webinar, that we're actively moving forward, engaging, collaborating, and talking about the opportunities to go to the next step and implementing the plans for the next step. And so we appreciate it. Ms. Lindeka, raise funds or raise communities, both. Yes, thank you so much, Mama Mantuka, raising both. And thank you again to our esteemed panelists. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. We know that it's late in some areas of the world, and we thank you all for joining us. We thank you all for staying with us. Again, on behalf of Standard Bank and behalf of MiDA Advisors, I want to thank you, Ms. Sonia, Ms. Mantuka, Ms. Joyce, and everyone who participated in this first of our webinar series focused on investing in Africa. The time is now. We're excited. Our next series, our next session will be in June. More information to come, and we'll be sending this to everyone who registered. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you, esteemed panelists. We thank you for your advocacy, for your leadership, for your expertise, and for your passion. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Can we say something?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yes. I just want to advise women. Earlier on, somebody asked, how do we grow the asset managers, female asset managers? I want to say, if you are on a board, ensure that you include in your IPS the development of women and people of color. If it's not there, then nobody will focus on it. The second thing is change the complexion of your board. If a complexion is male only, it will get off the agenda table. Make sure that your boards are diversified and there are women there who are prepared to fight the challenge for the minorities as well as women. The third thing is develop transformational policies. If your policies are saying something and you want to do another thing, it won't happen because your policies are restrictive to transformation and diversity. So those are the key messages that I want to leave with you, and ensure that women are developed, advanced, and their skills are recognized at all times. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you so much. I just want to make sure, Sonia or Joyce, anything else you would like to share before we depart?
Not for me.
No. I will not add anything to what Mama Mantuka just said. So yes.
She said it so eloquently. Thank you so much. You are part of the solution. So everyone together, working together, we can definitely achieve the change that we seek. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Mama Mantuka.
Thank you and good night. Thanks, Joyce and Sonia.
Yeah.
Thank you
glad to
so
have you.
much. Thank you, everyone.
And keep up the good work. And Nadine, keep up the good work. Thanks.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Yeah. Thanks, Nadine.